a lot of times regressions are kind of like defense mechanisms. So it's a way of a child reverting back to a time of earlier development where they remember things feeling more stable and more safe and more secure. So a lot of times for kids, that's when they were having their diapers changed by their mom and dad.
Hi, I'm Crystal Luce, Professor of Education.
And I'm Amy Ketchum, Pediatric Occupational Therapist.
Welcome to Plant the Seed of Learning, the podcast where we merge education and medical models to bring you science-based practical insights on all things early childhood.
Whether you're a parent, teacher, therapist, or policymaker, we're here to help you support children from the start. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have you join us today on our podcast. So let's start today with a fact or fiction. So, Crystal, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, if a child is not potty trained by age 3, something is wrong. Fact or fiction?
Ooh, definitely fiction.
Definitely fiction. Okay, so this is absolutely right. Potty training is a developmental process. It is not a deadline. Readiness varies widely based on neurology, sensory processing, communication, physical development, and lived experience. So this is especially true for children with disabilities. Today's guest will help parents move away from pressure and toward individualized, developmentally appropriate strategies.
Ooh, we are so excited to welcome Allison Jandu, a potty training expert and author of the Adaptive Toolkit for Potty Training Children with Disabilities.
So let me tell you a little bit more about Allison. Allison is the owner and founder of Potty Training Consultant. She is a highly sought after potty training expert who has helped thousands of families navigate this major milestone. She specializes in children of all ages and abilities, creating customized plans that build confidence and independence. A mom of 2, Allison blends hands-on experience with over 5,000 hours of evidence-based research in early childhood development, psychology, and human behavior. She has written accredited training programs, developed popular online courses, and authored 5 highly rated books on toileting for both adults and children. She has been featured on Good Morning America, New York Magazine, and BuzzFeed. Allison also serves as a trusted expert for major brands. Her mission is to transform the way families experience potty training. We are so excited to have her and talk about her newest book, which is especially important to me as an OT. I love that you are focusing on an adaptive toolkit, potty training for children with disabilities. So we cannot wait to dive in. Allison, welcome.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for having me today.
You bet. Let's get started right away by having you tell us a little bit about your book. Why did you decide to write it and what is it about?
Yeah, sure. So this book has been like kind of on my to-do list for the past several years. I get so many families that reach out to me who have kiddos with different disabilities that, they really struggle to find like proper guidance and techniques and strategies that really are effective for their unique situations. And I was like, this shouldn't have to be something where people have to like contact an expert and spend thousands of dollars and make it this long drawn out process. There should be a book for it that you can pick up and have the strategies right there as kind of like a reference guide while you're going through the process. So it's something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. And a couple years ago, I was lucky to connect with Taryn, who is she has her own advocacy for kiddos with disabilities called Extra Lucky Moms. She has a child who has Down syndrome. And so she has started this amazing community for parents who have kiddos that have varying disabilities. And so we kind of collaborated together on the book. And, with her advocacy expertise and actually living the life of a mom with a daughter who has some of the challenges associated with potty training a child with a disability, we were able to come together and kind of bring real life experience, like real life parent stories and experiences paired with kind of the science and the research and the proven strategies that I've developed in my experience, having been a potty training consultant for so many years. And I think it just came out as a really nice, relatable, but also like super informative resource for parents. So very excited to have it gotten that out in the world last year.
And
It's
that is
so
so
important.
generous. Yeah.
Yes. And it's on a topic that is on the minds of all parents going through potty training because it is
Exactly.
so challenging. No matter what you're dealing with, it's so challenging.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it feels even more intimidating when you do have a child that has disabilities and you might think that, oh, all of these, strategies that you hear about probably won't apply for my child because of all the, the complications and complexities that can come along with different diagnoses. So yeah, I know it can feel extra overwhelming for those parents.
Oh my gosh, yes. When you have a child who's differently abled, the one of the biggest pain points in early childhood, I think, is potty training. I think,
Totally.
and it's so generous of you to put it all out there in a book. So much expertise right
Thank
at
you.
parents' fingertips. So I think that's wonderful. So what would you say is the biggest misconception about potty training?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there are so many. I could that I could talk about. There's a lot of common ones, but I think probably the most common is that, you have to wait for your child to show interest before you can start the process. I'm a kind of a firm believer in the fact that you can start teaching them, and kind of like the title of your podcast, planting the seed, on the concept well before they have any idea or any interest in what the potty is or what it's used for. But I think it's really important from as young of an age as possible for kids of all abilities that you normalize it for them from an early start so that it doesn't feel like, as big and scary of a change when it is time to start moving away from diapers and attempting potty training. So I think that that can happen from a very young age and it tends to make the process a lot easier instead of waiting until, your child is 2, 3, and you're starting to hear of like, oh, when are you going to start potty training? Like, by then it's like you could have been working on it for a while now, and I think a lot of parents don't realize that. So you don't have to wait until your child is 2 or 3 years old to start kind of introducing the concept in just low pressure, stress-free ways through reading books together, watching
Okay.
videos with their favorite characters in them that are using the potty, inviting them into the bathroom when you're using the bathroom, and so that they get exposure to the space and the environment. Um, and just doing all these things kind of just eases them into it so that it's not like an abrupt weekend that you hear about sometimes where it's like, okay, we have time off this weekend, so we're gonna try potty training. And then you rip off the diapers like a band-aid and expect them to use this newfangled contraption that they've never seen before all over the course of a weekend. And it's kind of like, it might not work out so well that way. So that
No,
early
no,
preparation is really important.
that
Oh,
is so true.
smart.
So for the
Yeah.
parents that are going through this right now, what are some telltale signs that a child is ready? And what do you do if a child does not show readiness and preschool is telling you it's time?
Oh, good question. Yeah, there's a lot of pressures that come along with potty training, especially if your child does attend a school or daycare. I know that can add a lot of stress for parents because there's these deadlines in place sometimes that you feel like
Mhm.
you have to meet. But yeah, for signs of readiness, it might not entirely be like what parents are thinking of. A lot of the key signs that need to be there are more developmental, like related, as opposed to like bathroom specific things, which I think kind of gets lost in the detail a little bit with parents. They're like waiting for these outward obvious signs of like your child, telling you when they need a diaper change, or showing interest in the bathroom, or like wanting to sit on the toilet themselves. Like those things don't necessarily need to be there in order for your child to be considered ready to start the process. So some key things that you do want to have in place when possible are from a developmental standpoint, some level of communication skills. So whether it's got to be a combination of both receptive and expressive language, meaning that they can understand and follow certain simple directions, and that they also have some form to express or communicate their needs to you in some way. So again, that doesn't have to be verbal necessarily. Like, so for our kiddos who are nonverbal or kiddos with, differing disabilities as far as like their speech and communication goes, we just need to have something there. So whether it's gestures or sign language, or even if they just kind of grab your hand and pull you in the direction of the thing that they need, having that sort of communication ability is important before starting the potty training process to make it easier for them to comprehend and understand what is, what you're trying to teach them. Also, from a motor skill standpoint, it's kind of important to have at least the gross motor skills fairly well established when possible. So things like sitting, standing, walking, crawling, climbing, jumping, like those kinds of things tell us that your child has kind of the core muscle groups to be kind of physiologically capable of the potty training process. And from a safety standpoint, it helps them to be kind of safe, stable, and secure while they're accessing the potty, because ultimately we want them to be able to do that independently. So we don't want them to have to worry about like tipping over or falling off or tripping on their way to the potty when they're rushing, those types of things. So it does help to have kind of those gross motor skills in place before you're starting the process. Obviously, for kiddos who have different physical disabilities, there might need to be some work around there. That process might look a little bit different for them, but generally speaking, we do like to see that in place. One other thing that indicates biological readiness for potty training is to notice fewer wet diapers throughout the day. So you might notice that your child is starting to consolidate their pee a little bit more, and then instead of having kind of a constant trickle or constant wet diaper throughout the day, you might notice that they're able to stay dry for an hour or two in between diaper changes. And that's a good sign that their bodies are getting ready to start the process as well. So it's not always about like, your child wanting to sit on the potty, or your child like asking to have their diaper changed if they've peed or pooped, and those types of things. Like, it can be, you can be on the lookout for, is my child developmentally capable of this, as opposed to, are they interested and wanting to do this? So you can kind of guide the process a little bit yourself in the right direction if you start to notice those things in place.
Okay, those are really some subtle things that
Yeah.
parents might not be aware of. I think we often think of readiness as the child telling us, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to use the potty. And
Yeah,
that probably very rarely happens. I don't know.
pretty
Crystal has
much.
four. Crystal has four children, including a
Okay,
set of twins. I have two girls that somehow I got lucky. Potty training was easy in this house. They
good.
pretty much did tell me. My daughters pretty much did say, "Hey," or just started using the potty. They were kind of, that was one easy thing over here. But I'm sure Crystal has some stories too. But I'm curious. I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but when it comes to children who are differently abled or have developmental differences, um, how do parents know what readiness looks like for them if they are, behind in their motor skills? I know you mentioned sign language or just taking a hand and pull it like that. At least there's some level of communication.
Sure.
Um, and we're probably looking at a little bit later in the developmental trajectory that we would
Yep.
be addressing toilet training. So, are there any specific tips in that area?
Yeah, great question. So again, we want to focus more on capability over interest, right? So, and
Okay.
as as the parent, you're the expert in your child, right? Like, that's what I always tell people. Like, us experts can tell you all you want, but you're the expert on your child. So you have to kind of like assess and then trust what you think your child is actually capable of. And if you think that, yes, it might be a little harder, right? Like, it might take a little bit more effort. I might need to be a little bit more involved.
Mhm.
We might need to have other providers involved, as far as like occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech pathologists. It might need to be more of a team effort to kind of cover all the bases. But thinking about it just from, can my child do this? I think that they can do this, like if you have that kind of mindset, I think that really can take you in the right direction instead of just focusing on this is going to be harder because, everything naturally comes harder. It doesn't have to be like that. So if you take some time and kind of think about what the process might look like for your child in advance, the book really dives into a lot of different like characteristics that come along with varying disabilities. Like it doesn't focus on diagnoses necessarily, but more so symptoms and characteristics that can impact the toileting process for a child. So, think about things like if your child has autism, for example, do they have sensory processing challenges that could contribute to making toileting more complicated for them? And if you think about these things in advance, and think about the struggles that are potentially there, then you can have a plan kind of in place for how you're going to tackle that aspect of the process and how you can ease that and make that a little bit more accessible for them or a little bit easier for them. So it's really important to, with all kids are so different, right? So thinking about that and how you can really customize the process to meet them where they are instead of where you think that they should be is really, really important. And I think when parents tend to see the most success. So it's kind of a mindset shift that needs to happen.
Ooh, mindset is so important, especially for parents, because we get so excited when our children start going to the potty and
Mm-hmm.
we think, oh, we're home free, we don't need diapers anymore. But then accidents and regressions start to happen at home or when we're in public. So, what do regressions and accidents tell us about the child and what's going on with potty training? And how should parents respond to this?
Yeah, good one. So I love to talk about this because, like for accidents specifically, and we're talking about mindset shifting.
Mhm.
One thing that I always coach the families that I work one-on-one with is to embrace the accidents. And I know nobody wants to hear
Ooh.
that, and I know nobody wants to be like cleaning up pee off their floor all day long, but accidents are accidents are feedback. Accidents are when the most learning is taking place because, it's science, right? Like as we make mistakes, learning anything new, our brain is working hard in there to create new pathways to prevent us from making that same mistake again in the future. So if your child is having accidents, that means that they're learning. So it's really important to kind of think about it from that perspective instead of dreading all the accidents and trying to prevent the accidents at all costs, because that is when the most learning is going to be taking place. So during the actual introductory period of when you are starting the potty training process, accidents should be are normal and should be welcomed, and just try to, like I said, try to embrace that and recognize it as in like, okay, my child is learning, instead of like, oh my god, I can't believe I have to deal with this. So accidents are a very normal part of the learning process and tend to, I found in my consultancy that kiddos who have tons of accidents, as opposed to the kiddos, you also have kiddos who will kind of withhold and maybe have fear of releasing on the potty, or they struggle with constipation and those types of things. Those kiddos who withhold and don't have accidents actually are much harder to finally get over the hurdle than the kiddos who are having tons of accidents. So if your child is having accidents, it's a good thing.
Wow.
Count yourself kind of lucky. So I know, like mind blown, right? Um, yeah. But then regressions are something kind of different. So regressions are typically when your child has kind of shown their abilities and that they've been successful and kind of consistent with their potty use for some period of time, and then something happens to kind of shift and disrupt that, and they go back to having lots of accidents again. So the occasional accident here and there for the first several months is not unusual. So that's really nothing to be alarmed about if your child is having an occasional accident here and there where they're too busy at their best friend's birthday party and they forget to use the potty and have an accident, or if they're feeling really sick one day and, maybe they can't quite make it to the bathroom in time. Like those things are kind of normal and to be
Yeah.
expected during early childhood. It's when you start to see accidents kind of happening repeatedly and more consistently again that it would be considered an actual regression. And that's generally caused by some sort of disruption or event or something that caused your child some sort of stress. And a lot of times regressions are kind of like defense mechanisms. So it's a way of a child reverting back to a time of earlier development where they remember things feeling more stable and more safe and more secure. So a lot of times for kids, that's when they were having their diapers changed by their mom and dad so that they kind of reach back into that prior development and sit it, because kids don't always have ways of expressing themselves clearly, right? They don't always have the vocabulary to say like, I'm really feeling off. Like my new teacher, I'm not really getting along with her so much, and I need a little extra care and support right now. They don't have the tools to be able to say those things and communicate that clearly. So it might come out in behavior. It might come out as a potty training regression, and that's a lot of times when we see those kinds of things happen. So
Wow.
in those cases, it's important to just be patient. Again, try to meet your child where they are. Maybe not go back to diapers, but go back to offering reminders throughout the
Mhm.
day, taking some time to offer some extra connection time throughout the day can be
Okay.
helpful because maybe that's what they're seeking. That could be them just needing some extra love and care and connection from you.
Wow.
And a lot of times, if you can find other parts of your day to carve out some time and give that extra focus to them, it can help the accidents dissipate so that they don't feel like they have to resort to having the accidents to get that connection from you.
Wow.
Regression is fascinating. I
Yeah.
never thought about some of the things that you're speaking about. Is this any way connected to bedwetting?
So bedwetting tends to be a bit different. But again, it depends. Bedwetting is very rarely behavioral. Bedwetting is usually associated with physical
Okay.
difficulties as opposed to behavioral things. A lot of times bedwetting kids don't have much control over that.
Hmm.
So that's a combination of, hormonal development. It's a combination of muscle control, you know, just gradual physical development over time, more so than
Okay.
intentionally doing things or choosing not to use the potty. It's not necessarily, up
Excellent.
to them always. And that makes it a little bit more complicated to
Yeah,
figure out
yeah,
at the same time.
exactly. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
the neuroscience of potty training. Who would have
Mhm.
thought, right? And
I
I
tell
think,
you,
yeah, you put such a positive spin on that though, because yeah, I think that having accidents maybe teaches a child I don't like that sensation. I don't like that feeling. And
exactly.
yeah, there's a lot to be said there.
Yeah.
So as an OT, I'm often thinking about the sensory differences and sensory processing, sensory delay, and you've talked about that a little bit, but what are some sensory related barriers that parents might not realize are affecting their child's success? Because we can't always see that, right?
Yeah, and that's a really important thing to think about. And, even neuro otherwise neurotypical kids struggle with sensory things, and you may not even notice any of this until you start the potty training process, which can catch a lot of parents off guard, as in like, I don't understand why this is such a struggle for them all of a sudden. But there's, you know, potty training in general, all the steps and the process that goes into that
Mhm.
is very sensorily complex. So there's a lot of different things happening as far as from a tactile standpoint. Maybe they don't like the feeling of the elastic waistband on their underwear. Maybe they don't like the feeling of the poop coming out and falling away from their bottom as opposed to coming out and being contained up against their bottom in a diaper. That's a huge sensory difference.
Mhm.
They might not like the coldness from their bottom hovering over the open hole of the toilet or the potty. There's a lot of like different feelings, and like privacy is another big one that I think can be connected to a sensory sensation. Is that when they have their diapers still, they're completely covered, they're fully clothed, they can release their pee and poop doing whatever activity is they're doing in the moment, and they have full privacy because they're covered up. And then when you start using the potty, that kind of goes away. And that's a big shift for them to make sometimes. Um, I've had plenty of kids who don't like the sound of pee hitting the water of the toilet. So there's, auditory aspects of it as well. Kids might not like, they might be overwhelmed by different odors in the bathroom. So there's a lot of, stuff to be thought about from that standpoint. Um, so it's think about all five of your senses, like your standard senses, and
Mhm.
think about how that happens in the bathroom for you, and think about, maybe those could be some of the struggles that your child is having a hard time overcoming. Like kids not wanting to go into a public bathroom because of all the noise and the bright lights overhead, and just a lot of stuff is happening. So it's definitely worth trying to look at the process through your child's point of view, and think about maybe things that they haven't been exposed to before, and how that can feel um, off-putting and scary and just different overall for them, and think about how you can, make those adjustments and adapt the process to match what maybe their unique needs actually are.
It is so important to look at things through a child's lens because their point of view is so telling.
Yeah.
Your book focuses on adaptation. So, what is one small change families can make today to better support their child during the potty training process?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, again, Crystal, like it really depends on each family's unique needs and each child's, you know, unique process as far as like where things stand for them in the process. Because like you mentioned at the beginning, Amy, it's a process, right? It's not like an event that happens and then boom, 3 days go by and you're done.
Mhm.
It's an ongoing learning developmental process. So I would recommend to families to do kind of what we just talked about and take a step back and take off your mom glasses and take off, your parent perspective, and try to look at the potty training process through your child's eyes. Forget everything you know about it and think about it from their point of view. And think about how you could make this easier for them. Think about how maybe, yeah, this is kind of scary. Like, I don't like trying new things either, So, of course, it's scary for them. They're so young, they've never experienced this before. All they've known their whole life is diapers, and we're asking them to do something completely different.
Yeah.
So, how can
Mhm.
I make this process easier for them? How can I be there to support them through this instead of just continually kind of demanding to see progress? So, I think that's a really important thing for parents to take into consideration, and also to realize that it's okay if it takes a longer time than it took somebody else that like that went through the process. You shouldn't compare, like, because every child is so different. So making sure that you're not comparing, or you're setting yourself up for these random expectations that maybe you don't know where they came from, but it sounds good. Like it sounds like, oh, I'll start potty training and then within like a week or so, we should be pretty good. Like put all of that out the window, because you never know what you're going to get
Yeah.
until you get into it. But progress looks different for everybody. And we talk about that in the book, that success looks different for everybody. Progress looks different for everybody. You can consider it progress even without your child peeing or pooping in the potty. There's a lot of
Mhm.
steps to this learning process. Like if your child was scared to enter the bathroom before and now they're cool with like sitting on the toilet with their clothes on,
Yeah.
that's amazing progress, but that's a necessary step that needs to happen before you can get to the end result. So look at it as the next step in the staircase as opposed to the very top of the stairs, and try to focus on one small thing at a time. And I think that helps to keep parents' perspective a little bit more in line with how the process could realistically go for them.
You make such a good point about comparison. And one thing I really want parents to understand is there's no need to compare yourself to another family, another child situation, which is really hard with social media.
Yeah.
And, parents are posting, my child went on the potty today, and you feel like I'm failing at this, but you're really not.
Yeah.
Right, not at all.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Like, like I just said, progress looks different for everybody. So it might look different for you, and that's okay. Like, just feel good about where you are and what you're doing, because as long as you know you're working on it, and as long as you're thinking about it, and you're helping your child through this, like, you're doing a great job already. So
Yeah.
it's
Right.
gonna
It does
happen.
happen. It
It's
does
gonna
happen
happen. Yeah,
eventually.
it's gonna happen. Yep.
So, Allison, I want to discuss something that I've found a lot of parents are not necessarily aware of, and teachers as well, and that is retained reflexes. Can you talk a little bit about reflexes and what happens when they don't diminish or disappear as the child gets older, and how that affects using the potty? And do you ever see retained reflexes working with families and it interfering with child's ability to stay dry, and what that really means for parents?
Yeah, I think this is something that is definitely not talked about enough. I think even a lot of doctors don't necessarily like flag this as a potential challenge, but some kiddos who struggle with potty training do struggle with something called retained reflexes. So when and Amy, you could speak to this for ages, I'm sure. When a baby is born, they have a set of reflexes. It's innate. It's something that all, babies are born with. And over time, as they grow older, they get integrated, and they kind of phase into the normal function of the body. And for some kids, those things don't naturally integrate at the time frame that they would be expected to normally. There are a couple that can directly impact toileting, the biggest one being the spinal galant reflex. And we see that a lot with kiddos who struggle with both constipation and bedwetting. So if your child is struggling with that with no other seeming explanation, then it's worthwhile to explore the possibility that they have a retained spinal galant reflex. And basically, that is, you can check it really easily. Like, you can take them to an OT and have it checked, or you can check it at home. There's some good videos on YouTube of how to check this at home. It's very, it's non-invasive. And it's basically about movement of the hips
Yeah.
and sensation in the back. And sometimes that can trigger and cause your child to involuntarily release their bladder. And then all of a sudden, you're having accidents and you're not sure why. So if your child isn't able to overcome some of their potty training challenges, and you feel like you've tried everything, and I hear this from parents all the time, we've tried everything. There are certain physical contributions that may be being overlooked that could be making it more difficult for your child. So, and this doesn't mean that they have a disability or, anything like that.
Right.
It can be more prevalent in kids with disabilities, but it's not always connected to disabilities.
Yeah.
So, it's just definitely something that should be considered
Mhm.
if your child is struggling and not seeing progress. And
Mm.
if they do have it, it's not a big deal. Like, it's not a big deal. There are things, you can work with an OT. They can give you exercises to do things to help integrate the reflex naturally, and then things tend to kind of, even themselves out when it comes to the potty training side of things once you get that stuff evaluated and addressed. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of physical contributions that can go into potty training struggles for sure.
Right. I think especially with bedwetting, I know so often working with children, even school-age children, I've had parents pull me aside and say, they're still wetting the bed at night and they're in third
Mhm.
grade. And
Mhm.
when we go back and assess, we do find retained reflexes, often gallant.
Mhm.
And I think, it's kind of a big relief and liberating for parents to find
Yeah,
out, like, oh, okay, there's some therapy we can actually be doing for this, and it's
exactly.
it's not behavioral, and it's, the child's frustrated as well, but
Yeah.
there are options, and occupational therapy, physical therapy, we can really
Mhm.
help with these things. So really
Oh,
glad we're talking about that.
Oh, me too. I wish I knew all this so long ago when I needed it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I know one big fear for parents is going out into public places, and especially unfamiliar places. They're
Yeah.
taking their child to a new restaurant or an outing somewhere,
Mhm.
and it's a new potty.
Yeah.
What are your on-the-go tips or strategies for families dealing with this right now?
Yeah, so one of my biggest mantras is that I don't want you to be held hostage and feel like you need to be stuck at home just because you're potty training. Like, this is all great experience. Like, your child's going to need to use the potty at home
Mhm.
and wherever you happen to be at the time. They're going to have to learn how to use the potty out in the real world. So it doesn't make sense to like adjust your whole lifestyle and routine to stay home just to, tackle the potty training process. Like a couple days at home is fine. And then get back out into your regular schedule. Like don't let it hold you back. So there are some things that you can do so that you can feel a little bit more prepared and like you can still support them in the process while they're out of the house. Number one, I like to call it a potty training survival kit. So just pack yourself. Like you can use your existing diaper bag and just swap out a few of the things that you had in there. So for the diapers that you have, put a few extra changes of clothes just in case your child has an accident. You can use the diaper like disposal bags to store wet or soiled clothes in until you can get them home to wash them. Having like some old burp cloths or just absorbent cloths in the diaper bag so that you can wipe up, any mess if it happens. But overall, just being prepared, I think, really helps you feel more confident and it helps your child feel more confident. Like you said, you mentioned like going to a new place where maybe you're not sure how your child's going to feel about the bathroom.
Hmm.
Assume that they're not going to want to use the bathroom in public for a while. Like they might not feel comfortable using a public restroom, especially if it's like the one in Target, for example, where it's like big and loud and there's multi stalls and there's lots of people coming in and out and so much is happening in there. So I recommend like keeping a small potty with you at all times, whether it be like a travel potty or even like a small floor potty you can just keep in the trunk of your car or in the back of your car that they can use. And at least if give them the option to try the regular bathroom. But if they're like really not feeling it, then at least they have a safety net of the small potty that maybe you can walk out to the car and use in an environment that's not as stimulating and overwhelming for them. So you can still continue the learning when you're out of the house. Like you don't have to be like, oh, we're just going to put pull-ups back on while we're out of the house. Like give them
Mm.
the opportunity, trust their abilities. They're
Ooh.
probably more capable than maybe you're giving them credit for.
Yes,
And hey, if your kid has an accident in the grocery store, like nobody cares. You're the only one that cares. Like
exactly.
everybody's been there, for the most part. Nobody is going to judge you. Nobody's going to judge your child. These things
No,
happen. Like just
no,
take it
you
in
have to live
stride.
your
We're
life.
moms, right? Like we
Yes,
have to roll with the punches. So it's just
exactly.
kind of one of those rites of passage that is part of the potty training process and just get back out there. You've got this.
Right. You don't want to stay at home all day
No.
or
Neither
all
does your
week.
Yeah,
child.
no, you'll go crazy.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Gosh, you're such a wealth of information, Allison. We could go on and on all
Thank
day,
you. I
but
could talk all day.
I know we have to wrap up soon, and I want to ask you your, one tip that you can give to our listeners. But first, I just want to ask, I know there's a lot of listeners thinking that they have more questions for you than we're going to have time to get to today. So you are a potty training consultant. How could our listeners consult directly with you if they have a child that they're working with right now that they can use some additional help with? What is a good way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. So my website is pottytrainingconsultant.com, and that has kind of all the background information about the company and me and my team and our experts. So if you want to schedule a consultation, you can just email me directly, which is info@pottytrainingconsultant.com, and I'll help you. We can either work directly together, or I can connect you with one of our experts who are also amazing, and we can get you that one-on-one support that you need. But if you think that maybe, the book is also obviously a great resource if you have a kiddo with different disabilities or different abilities. And then I have some online courses as well for varying topics, including just like kind of a comprehensive start to finish potty training. And then I have nighttime potty training, um, pooping on the potty, which is a big issue.
Hmm.
And then I have a mini regressions course as well. So if
Wow,
you're interested, you can check those out on the website.
got it all covered.
I
That's
try.
So
amazing. That's
helpful. Hmm.
amazing. So we love to end each episode with one tip that listeners can try tomorrow. What would be your one tip for our mommies and daddies who are out there fighting the fight right now, working on the potty training? What is one tip you would share?
Okay, so I'll leave you with this, and it might sound a little scary, but I promise that it works. And that is to throw your timers away. So if you've been like going through the potty training process and you're doing one of the methods that says like set a timer for every 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever and take your child to the potty at those times,
Oh,
stop doing that.
Okay.
And the reason being is that many kids, well, kids in general just, have different bladder capacities, different muscle control. Some kids do need to go potty every 30 minutes, but there are some kids who can hold it for 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes. So if you have a kiddo who, maybe can hold it for a longer period of time, but you're taking them to sit on the potty every 30 minutes, their brain's not getting as much time to, or as many experiences to learn what a full bladder feels like because you're taking them to sit on the potty and empty their bladder before it gets a chance to fill up and send a signal to the brain saying that it's full. So this can delay
mm,
the urge recognition and the self-initiation portion of potty training, which is what we ultimately want our kids to be able to do is take themselves to the potty when they feel like they need to go. So try to refrain from using the timers and just more so instead focus on your child's natural indications that they need to use the bathroom. Most kids have like a tell or a cue that tell you that they need to go, like maybe they're wiggling around or they're grabbing themselves or standing on their tiptoes or something like that. They have like a little cue. So if you can figure out what that is, instead of doing the timer, just be like, oh, I can see that you've got the wiggles. That's your body telling you you need to go potty. Come on, let's go sit and take them to the potty at those times when their body is already trying to send that signal and helping them make that connection. And it makes the process a lot faster. So that's definitely something that you could give a try and see. It can help remove some of the frustration, some of the power struggles. So it can really make a big difference in the process.
What
thank
a
you
great
so
tip.
much. Oh,
Yes.
I loved all of your helpful tips. I wish I would have heard this podcast. Well, we didn't have it back then
Yeah.
when I was potty training my own children.
Thank
I bet
you.
you hear that all the time, Allison.
I do,
We
yeah.
needed you
Well,
back
at first
then.
it's like met with shock, like you do what for a living? You help
Right.
parents potty training? And then they're like, oh yeah, I wish I had that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
amazing. Well, I know all of your tips are going to help so many of our listeners. This has been amazing, and we are so grateful to have had you today.
thank you
Thank you.
guys.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. All right. Take care and have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.